welcome back to another Backlot Banter movie review. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today I'm joined by my absolutely famished co-host, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about The Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I would say a pretty anticipated movie. The Hunger Games has been becoming more popular as people our age grew up with it, have become older and had a sense of nostalgia about it. It's been a while since Mockingjay Part 2. But we've finally seen it, and if you have seen it as well, you can talk to us about it by joining our Discord or leaving a comment about it, seeing where this kind of stacks up against the other Hunger Games movies. If you've watched them in a recent amount of time, it might be hard to remember.
I did.
He did, yeah. Huh. I didn't prepare at all. So we're going in two different perspectives on this. Someone who remembers everything about the other Hunger Games movies and how this may or may not tie into them, and me who has... frankly, basically no clue. I recognize snow. I recognize the term Katniss one time. But, Tanner, we've seen The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
That's right.
Maybe one of the most unwieldy movie titles.
It's a bit
ever.
long. Everyone should just be calling it Thug-to-Bosis.
Thug-to-Bosis.
Like we have.
Yes.
Yeah. You want to hear my thoughts, Tucker?
I do, actually. Yeah, I didn't finish my sentence.
Yeah, that's all right. I like Thug-to-Bosis, Tucker. I had a really solid time with this. I've always sort of like been in anticipation of this being like, this looks pretty solid actually. I was not familiar with the book at all.
Yeah.
I only knew it as like, oh, it's about young Coriolanus Snow.
I was more of like, oh, they made that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I didn't have a lot of expectations going into this, other than like trailers looked good, and it lived up to those expectations, and I think exceeded them in some ways. Sure. I think this thing is, it's a long movie, but I think it makes use of that run time for a lot of it. It covers a lot of ground. It covers, basically 2 movies worth of content.
I would say
we have like the 10th Hunger Games and then the events ensuing that really form Coriolanus Snow into the fascist dictator of Panem.
Oh yeah, fascist boyfriend
of Panem. I think that Tom Blythe is good, but Rachel Zegler is really fantastic in this film. And it looks great too. I think it has this very unique sense of aesthetic that the other Hunger Games films didn't really have. Those are just sort of like vaguely dystopian, futuristic. Well, this has like some sort of like retro aspect.
Yeah, it's like an Art Deco kind of look. Yeah, and I think that there are certain elements of this movie that work really well. I'm whelmed by The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. There are some elements that I thought were really good, but there are other elements like some of the pacing and some of the writing that I'm a little bit mixed on, and I don't think it ends in a particularly strong place. Okay. So while I think there's some decent action, there's some decent sets, and there's I think a solid amount of good performances, I think it's just a harmless, solid entry in a franchise. Sure. Like, this isn't one of the ones that I've been disappointed with over the course of this year with all sorts of big budget studio productions, IP movies coming out and being like, yeah, they're kind of just putting this out to make a quick buck. There was a little more effort put into this one. I really do respect that, but I also do think that it feels a little bit shaky in some areas. And I want to start with where I feel this movie is at its most uneven, which is Tom Blythe as Coriolanus Snow. He has the look. He looks like he could grow up to become Donald Sutherland. Yes. But I feel like while he's good in some sequences, some of his line delivery and some of his emotion just doesn't land in others. And so I've had a hard time thinking he is the character I really want to follow in this scenario. I feel like so many of the other supporting characters felt so much more interesting. And while he has like an interesting role to play, his personality is a little bit iffy. His motivations are sometimes unclear and kind of shift on a dime. And Tom Blythe's performance is, I would say, hit or miss. Because there's some times where he's required to do an emotional moment or say a line and it's just flat. And I'm like, we need maybe 5 or 6 more takes on this one. This isn't a 1 or 2 more takes. It's like, Tom, turn it up a bit, buddy.
Yeah, I think he's good. Tucker, I see where you're coming from. We talked about this a little bit last night in Snow's character arc, and how I think it could be displayed a bit more clearly. But I think there is, a bit of subtlety about it. Actually, I think might be the disconnect that he is characterized as someone who is always sort of underhanded. Like that's kind of the assumption that you have about his character. It doesn't display itself clearly until a ways into the film.
Sure.
But it reveals itself, I think, that he's always out for himself.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's the intent.
Yeah.
But I also don't necessarily think that is what is super portrayed for a large chunk of the movie, which is that 10th Hunger Games where he is primarily siding with his friend who wants the Hunger Games to end. And so that bond between them makes me think, okay, Snow's got a little bit more passion behind him, or like understanding of humanity, and not just like heartless and dictatorful and fascist and all that, which obviously he becomes by the actual Hunger Games movies, because it's a fake one. It's a fan entry. And especially with his bond with Lucy Gray, the bond that they have together, and the actions that he's doing, especially near the beginning of the movie where he's wiping her tears and bringing her food and stuff. There's more heart in that than I believe pays off by the end of the movie, where he kind of just loses that, and I'm unclear why. Well, and I think that's really what bothers me.
It's the weight of consequences over his head, because when he gets to we're sort of jumping around the whole movie, but that's fine. When he gets to District 12 and he's sort of he's relegated to the role of peacekeeper in District 12, and he's hanging out with Lucy Gray, and they're sitting in fields talking about like, what if we got away from it all? Like, I think that is a fork in the road for his character, but it is his upbringing in the capital, his like he just goes along with the capital line. I think that's what he's comfortable with. Like, it is the unfamiliar that frightens him a little bit about Lucy Gray. It infatuates him with her as well. But like, when it comes time, he's like, oh, my friend could rat on me, or I could be discovered in this way or this way. I have to find a way to like disconnect myself from it all. It's too risky to go down that road. I'm going to sell out my friend, tell Viola Davis what's going on, and get back in the good grace of the Capitol.
I mean, I all of that tracks. I just think that from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie, there's never really a moment where I feel him being corrupted.
I see that.
It kind of just happens when he's in District 12. It's like, oh, I guess we're doing that now. And I think that combined with the fact that Coriolanus Snow does grow up to be ostensibly the villain of the films that we've seen before, means that I struggle to connect to him. He is he's a character that isn't very distant by the start of the movie, and then as the movie goes on, I'm like, no, this guy doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't really like him, and I don't want to follow him. Everyone else's motivations make a lot more sense. I think basically everyone else's performances are outshining Tom Blythe, and because his motivations and performance are shaky, I'm like, let's turn the camera anywhere else. Let's see what Lucy Gray's up to. Let's go back to Peter Dinklage or Viola Davis or Jason Schwartzman.
That's just kind of like the nature of the story of us following the moral fall of someone who becomes the fascist dictator of this world. But yeah, I mean, to sort of like close the book on Tom Blythe a little bit. I think a lot of your sort of issues can hold water. I think there is a bit of there could have been a bit more clearness about his turn.
Well, especially because there's so much time.
Exactly.
To dedicate to it.
I totally get that. But someone I do want to talk about is Rachel Zegler. Who I came out of this movie, even watching the movie, having an understanding of the Hunger Games and what that did for Jennifer Lawrence. I was like, God, I hope Rachel Zegler, this is her Jennifer Lawrence moment. Where she becomes the biggest star in the world for multiple years to come. Because she is fantastic in this movie. And of course, she has a bit more to do. She's a bit more showy than Tom Blythe is, where he's sort of like humming and hawing and whispering quiet nothings in people's ears about unhanded plans. She is up on stage, she is singing, and her singing is this very powerful bravado in these moments for her character. It's told to us very early on that she only sings when she has something to say, and I think that comes across in every moment where she does sing.
That's a good point.
It is not doled out lightly. It is in pivotal scenes, emotionally impactful scenes.
And they even really drive that home by always showing reactions of people listening to her singing when she is singing. I think there's 4 or 5 times throughout the movie where she really starts belting it.
I think
and then we cut to the crowds and they're like,
Rachel Zegler has 8 songs, I believe.
Holy shit!
On the Hunger Games soundtrack. The Thug to Bosa soundtrack.
Actually, on Letterboxd I saw she's credited as songs. I don't really know what that means, but I've never seen songs in someone's Letterboxd credits before. But she's the best part of this movie.
I think so too.
She is so great as Lucy Gray, the morality that she has behind her, and this interesting history as someone who's kind of outside of the traditional district system.
I love that.
It really expands what we know of the world of the Hunger Games, and the fact that we're following her being a little bit more of a caring tribute in the Hunger Games, but she also does have this self-motivation, and her bond with Snow is very interesting. And Rachel Zegler nails all of that. One thing I realized as we were talking about this, I'm like, we've reviewed every Rachel Zegler movie. Because this is her third film. And in our minds, oh yeah, it's Rachel Zegler. She's a star. But she's been in 2 movies so far. One great, where she's amazing, and one bad, where she's fine. Like, she's not terrible in that
2
movie,
box office flops as well.
Exactly. And this one seems to be changing that, because not only is she really a star of this movie, and she really bumps up all the moments of... It's like, she's the reason why you care about this movie. Yeah. Frankly. It's like, Lucy Gray is an interesting person. She's someone you care about. She's someone who has good morals. And watching her push back against Snow, that dynamic, I think, is really,
he's more of a songbird guy than a snake guy.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. But, of course, I want to see her get bigger roles off of this, and hopefully get out of the sort of IP section of the world that she's in.
It doesn't seem that way from her upcoming projects on IMDb, but hey.
Yeah. Hey, Y2K. That's not an IP.
That's true. Tucker, that's a great point.
But I also think that it is a supporting cast. That is the other highlight of this movie. I think some of the like traditional Hunger Games aspects of the fights and the broadcasting and the dystopian elements, those are good. Yeah. But I think that the supporting cast is where this movie really shines. Rachel Zegler, and they just bit parts, but they show up so often that there's just they're full on side characters of Viola Davis and Jason Schwartzman and Peter Dinklage and Andrea Rivera.
Yeah, I think it's Josh or Andrea Josh. 1 second, Josh Andreas Rivera.
Yes. All of them are amazing. And Hunter Schafer as well.
Yeah.
All of them are so good in all these roles.
Will say, liked Hunter Schafer, love seeing her in this stuff, needed more of her in this movie.
Yeah, she kind of just shows up every once in a while. It's like, oh, that's too bad, Snow.
Well, the last time we see her is on like a Zoom call or whatever.
A really shitty, like, BioShock Zoom call.
But yeah, I mean... You have the capital people who always just get to choose scenery and be like over the top in these Hunger Games movies,
and the camera's always like looking up at them as their crazy costumes and hair like
Viola,
the screen.
Viola Davis has the 2 different colored eyes. I forget what that's called.
Heterochromia.
Thank you. And she just gets to like be sort of no. I'm very rich and mysterious.
She's always doing crazy things with her lips. She's like. It's really good.
And she's got her giant tank of rainbow snakes, and like she just gets to be crazy. And I mean, Viola Davis is a great actress.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just fun when you get to see someone who has that gravitas, just to get to cut loose in a role like this. Yeah. Peter Dinklage less so. He's not like that over the top, but he's he gets to do his Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones thing, where he's like, "Oh, I'm very much more intelligent than everyone else. Yes. I designed the Hunger Games."
Yeah, but frankly, the real star of the show is Jason Schwartzman. Yeah, he is the actor in this movie that got the most reaction out of the crowd, because he's up on screen. Yes. He's saying weird shit. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense, but the amount of giggles in the audience frankly, I don't hear people laugh or react that much in many blockbuster movies nowadays. But whenever he's on screen and he's saying something dumb, it's like, yeah.
Especially something that's not like, this movie is not like an action comedy like a lot of the blockbusters we get nowadays are.
Comedy, like he's the comic relief character.
He is. So he had some shoes to fill, Tucker. Yeah, with Stanley Tucci in the original.
They're very similar.
I think they're the same last name too, Flickerman.
Oh, okay, yeah. So like his father,
great grandfather, something like that.
Not great grandfather. There's like 40.
It's 60 years. Yeah. So yeah, father or grandfather or something like that.
I don't know how quickly they're churning them out though.
They could be churning them out pretty fast.
Children, I mean.
But yeah, I think I like that he has like a bit of a different persona. Sure. He's not just doing Caesar Flickerman from the Hunger Games movies. He's doing, what is his name? Lucky Flickerman.
Yeah, Lucretius Lucky Flickerman.
Lucretius Lucky Flickerman.
And he flips a coin up in the air and he's doing little magic things. He's wiping his tears.
He's a weatherman and a magician, and like he's a bit more awkward on screen than Tucci was, like by design, obviously. And that just makes him much more different as a host and much more entertaining as a host to see him kind of like not really sure what's going on. And, can I get a drink, please?
Well, I also think that really ties into another element that I do think is very strong in this movie, is watching the Hunger Games be formed.
Yes.
As we're going. Of course, it's the 10th Hunger Games. Yes. And I was kind of under the impression that was like the first one.
I always thought it was the first one too.
But it's not. And I think that's okay. I think there's still a story to be told. If, God forbid, we get other prequel trilogy.
We were talking about that. I think Suzanne Collins has probably got another one in the works.
But I like that it's the 10th one because it shows that this is something that has been established and that people know that it is a thing, but it's not, people aren't used to it yet.
Yeah,
the people in the Capitol aren't quite sure, the ratings are waning, and obviously the spectacle that we know the Hunger Games to be is what's really missing.
Exactly.
And this is the origin of the spectacle of the Hunger Games, and I think maybe the strongest element of this movie in its themes of having crazy things happen and trying to attach the viewer base to the tributes, that kind of stuff about how we consume media, and like that's kind of the only thematic thing about this movie. But I think it's done pretty well, and it plays into this history of the Hunger Games where we see them have the donations for the first time. And
there's Snow's idea, which is an interesting lore element that's added to this, is that Snow sort of formed the Hunger Games into what they are.
Because previously, from what we can gather from this, is it was just like a big stone room with weapons in the middle,
and everyone killed themselves within killed each other
5 hours.
Exactly.
Which is so different from what we know of, like the elaborate jungles and everything going on. It's like and the entire country of Panem watching. It's so different, and I really like that.
And to that point, and talking, I'll bring in a little context as someone who watched the rest of the films here. I like that we have that lore element of Snow being the one who introduced all these elements, and there's a recurring question that Viola Davis asks him of, what are the Hunger Games for? And something that Donald Sutherland Snow brings up multiple times in the original quadrilogy, Old Man Snow, is of how it's important to give the people of Panem hope.
Sure.
That's like a big theme of it.
They want their tribute to win.
But
associate yourself with
he's like, you just dole out that little bit of hope, and that keeps people under control. Hopeless people are difficult to control, and people with too much hope are difficult to control. But if you can make that a commodity, it's very valuable. And I think that you see the seed of that theme in those movies in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I love the setting of that first Hunger Games because it's typically a big just stone arena or whatever, but now it's like been bombed by the rebels.
I thought that was really good. And they just didn't fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like that they didn't fix it because it also they didn't fix it, but they made that to be a part of the set design, quote unquote, of the fact that there are these tunnels and there are these piles of rubble and then climb on. It does make it a little bit more dynamic, and it does show the carelessness of the Capitol to be like, we're going ahead with it.
And we have to have the Hunger Games. We cannot delay them. And another interesting world thing is something I believe Josh Andreas Rivera brings up, Sejanus Plinth.
Yeah, what a crazy fucking name.
Is how this is the 10th Hunger Games.
And how saying stupid in names.
Yes, they do love that. How this is the 10th Hunger Games, and how they initially started as punishment for the people of Panem for rebelling, but now he's like, the oldest of these kids were 8 years old when the war ended, and so why are we still doing this? Is it still a punishment for the people, or are we just reveling in these people's suffering? Because he has this moral quandary about the whole Hunger Games and talks about it multiple times. And I just love that element of it, that there are people at this point in the Hunger Games world history questioning that. You know.
And you can assume that was happening from the beginning, but he plays an interesting role in that he is connected to someone who's very high power. His father is very rich and is maybe one of the leaders of the Capitol. I think that is another thing where the sort of external lore stuff, I don't think is very well explained in this movie. Snow's father is connected to Peter Dinklage's character, and his friend's father has the money, but what's his role? And then why was his son from District 2? And then there's a lot of questions that are outside of the realm of this particular set of characters that we're following that I feel aren't particularly well explained. They talk about it constantly, but I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I think you just gotta understand it in vagaries. You don't need to know the family trees and all of that.
Yeah, sure. But I think it would explain some motivations a little bit better, because there is a lot of. I do think it matters because the connection between Snow and his friend Sejanus, and the connection between Snow and Peter Dinklage's character, and then Viola Davis and Peter Dinklage's character, there is history here that is impacting the way they interact with one another and make choices.
Sure.
And because it's not explained, I'm like, I mean, I guess I can assume.
I mean, I think
happened,
for me, it's like, yeah, I understand like the basic premise, like, you know, Peter Dinklage's character, something Highbottom.
Yeah, Dean
Highbottom.
Dean Casca Highbottom.
That's right. Dean Highbottom and Snow's father invented the games together, but Highbottom like took the credit for it. And like Sejanus Plinth, his father like hands out a prize for the mentors every year, like whoever is the best.
This is the first year they have mentors.
Oh no, sorry, he hands out a prize for
like smartest kid in class. Or whatever.
Best kid in class.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
But that's
good
another
apple.
thing.
Yeah,
that's another thing that is like talked about in vagaries. The fact that this is something that they've been doing for years, and there's an award they give out, and the prize that Snow is going for. But why do they hand that
opening
out?
stuff? That opening stuff, I think, is a little bit like, okay, I'm
trying. They just drop you in the middle of it, and Snow's like getting all gussied up, and he shows up, and they're like, "Who are these people? Why are you here? Why is your family poor, but you're still in the capital? But then you're dressed up nicely." And I just think there's a lot of questions that this movie poses that it doesn't seem worried with.
That's probably something that was lost in the adaptation, I'd say,
yeah.
is that Francis Lawrence is looking at this. He's like, the movie's 2 hours and 40 minutes. We can't really add another 15 at the beginning, you know, before we get into the real meat of this story. So at a certain point, I understand that.
Yeah.
I also want to say, since I mentioned him, Francis Lawrence does a good job.
Yeah.
Having rewatched the first Hunger Games film from 2012, which is not directed by him, it's directed by Gary Ross. And then seeing the jump from that to Catching Fire in the Mockingjay films, like Francis Lawrence is a good director, at least when it comes to the Hunger Games films.
Yeah.
And I found myself
not a Red Sparrow guy.
Not a Red Sparrow. I haven't seen it. I found myself though sort of perplexed and like really like interested that like I see him directing this film and the choices and how this film looks and all of that. I'm just like, it's crazy that it looks so much better than like recent MCU entries that we've been getting, or recent, you know, take your pick of the litter of other IP blockbuster titles. It was like, this movie looks real. Like, there's no moment of shoddy CGI or green screen or whatever. I'm like, it all feels very material.
Yeah.
It feels very informed and very well thought out in terms of design and direction. And I was just like, am I really like doing the we must return thing for fucking Francis Lawrence?
Yeah. Well, I think that the real direction of this movie where it does feel distinct is in production design.
Yeah.
The production design is really, really stellar here. I think some of the sets especially, it's kind of hard to tell what is green screen backgrounds because they're definitely there.
Yeah.
There are some like ridiculous, crazy tall sets and stuff that they can't build. But the fact that they mesh them so nicely, I think works really well. And some of my favorite sets are this. I don't know why this room has like giant sitting statues, but there's like 6 of them in a circle. And it's like, what is this fucking room for? I don't know, but it's cool.
Yeah.
And especially, I think one of my favorite sets is the classroom that Dean Highbottom teaches in. That has this spiral desk in the middle, and then like imbalanced rows of seats going up in sort of a Coliseum seating thing. It's like there was some really interesting attention to detail in the set design or the production design, even including CG backgrounds and green screens and stuff, because it meshes very well and it all feels very grand and like complex and stuff. I really like that.
Yeah. I guess to sort of close it out here, I just felt I was worried about this movie being 2 hours and 40 minutes, but I found myself sort of quite gripped and interested throughout the runtime, throughout both movies that we were given in this movie.
I will say the fact that it is ostensibly 2 separate stories is a little bit hit or miss for me. I like that the Hunger Games, the 10th Hunger Games, is not everything, that we do get some after. But it also feels like the movie's a little bit aimless at that point, because the 10th Hunger Games finishes and you're like, what the fuck is going to happen next? I have no idea.
The driving like tension of that 10th Hunger Games and like I have to make sure Lucy Gray wins. I have to make sure.
That's very compelling.
It's very compelling, and it's gone obviously in that second half, but I think there's just something that like grabbed me about this whole premise of like he's been like cast out to the bottom of the barrel.
I found it interesting, but like it's hard to. I guess his goal kind of is to get back to the capital, but he's also like kind of waffling about that.
Well, that's kind of the point, is that he's given this like fork in the road of like, should I go on the run with Lucy Gray or should I not?
Well, the reason I think it doesn't grab me as much is because I think this is another element of the movie where the external plot is kind of lost in the shuffle. Because there is a rebel uprising and these other characters that know Lucy Gray, and then his friend is like working with them. They go in the back room and he shoots one of them, but who was that person? I don't think I ever saw them before. And
he shoots the mayor's daughter.
No, I remember that. Yeah. But then, like, there's this other guy that also dies, and there's a third guy, and then who was that guy? And, like,
he was one of the rebels. Yeah,
the
exactly.
tension in this moment, I understand between Sejanus and Snow and Lucy Gray. But then you throw in 3 other characters, one of which I've seen before, and then they're supposed to have this massive ramifications. I'm like, I don't know why any of this really happened. I can make, like, general, like, guesses about it.
But I think you should probably read the book if you want background on all those characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there was just something about it that just really grabbed me. Like this whole, they're peacekeepers, and it's kind of like this, it's like a standard kind of military story of like, they're there controlling the populace, but they sort of befriend some of them, and there's a tension there when they get, commands from their higher officers. Shout out Burn Gorman. Love seeing Burn Gorman and stuff. Love that guy. Sam and I turned to each other when Burn Gorman popped up. I was like, oh, it's Burn Gorman.
First people to ever do that.
Exactly. But yeah, Tucker, is there anything else we want to talk about with Thugtabosis?
No, I think we're good.
I enjoyed Thugtabosis. I think it has there are some marks against it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, it is a 2 hour and 40 minute, very compelling action blockbuster that fills out the world of Hunger Games, which, at a certain point I was like, watching the first 4, I was like, yeah, it's pretty interesting, the world, but I don't know if I really care. But like, it got me invested in certain elements of it that I didn't know I would be invested in. Rachel Zegler is fantastic. Tom Blythe is good at the very least, and I don't know. I just really dug this thing. I don't know if it's a movie, if it's one that I'll be rewatching anytime soon.
Yeah. But it's one to think back pretty fondly.
Exactly. It's like a good, finally a good blockbuster from 2023.
Sure.
But no, I'm gonna go with 7.5 out of 10 for Thugtabosis.
I'll go a little bit lower. I'll go like a 6.6 out of 10. I do think it is a good movie, and I think that in its direction, in its set pieces, in the lore that it builds for Hunger Games, and in the cast of performances, I think it's a very good movie, and certainly a bar above some of the other IP stuff we've been getting recently. But I also think that it is a little bit unfocused.
Sure.
I think that it some sequences aren't as good as others. There are moments of line delivery that I don't think land, and overall, I feel like it has so much time to develop things, but it's covering so much ground that nothing really feels like it's drilled into. It's like, we always got to keep moving, we got
2 movies in this movie.
And don't worry about that thing we were talking about last time. You'll figure it out later. It's an interesting movie, and I think it is well done. But I was really expecting it to feel a little bit more
holistic,
focused. Yeah. But instead, it's just like, we got all these ideas. There's just a lot going on.
Well, there's a lot of ground to cover, of course.
But it is good, and I do recommend seeing it. It seems like people were really into Hunger Games.
There's people who are like, this is the best movie I've ever seen. I was like, let's rein it in a little bit. It's good. Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, it's good.
And Tanner, is this the start of a prequel trilogy?
A prequel trilogy? I don't know.
I think it's gotta be.
I think
it's gotta be.
I think Suzanne Collins goes somewhere else in the timeline, frankly.
Okay.
I think we see the first Hunger Games, know.
Well, here's the thing. The reason I disagree with that is because I feel like this being as popular as it is...
That's a good point, too.
And frankly, the ending being like mystery stuff of like, where did Lucy Gray go? What is Snow's goal next? Like, how does he ingratiate himself more into this culture? There's a story there.
I think so too.
I think it's like a dual protagonist narrative where we're equally following the growth of Snow and maybe Lucy like organizing rebels or something. And I'm interested in that movie because I like Lucy Gray as a character.
I like this pitch. I like this pitch.
Well, it feels like what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm excited for that, and it will be really interesting to see like once the Hunger Games continues to expand, how we sort of view this group of movies.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of the next Star Wars prequels. Not in quality.
I actually did see some people drawing comparisons to be like the scene of them sitting in the field. It's like fascist boyfriend talking about his politics to his liberal girlfriend, and she's like, I don't know about that. They're very similar settings and stuff like that. It's an interesting comparison for sure.
Yeah. But we'll see you guys for this movie that is not confirmed and we have no idea if it's going to happen yet. But we'll see you then.
Bye.
Sorry, just stretching. Just stretching a little bit. Just.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Get all the kinks out. I get it.
Whipping and nay-naying and dabbing are my kinks.